Welcome back to the Cozy Cottage Homestead. Who wants to learn how to make seasoned sourdough sandwich bread? Stay tuned. I know this has been one y'all been waiting for. Welcome back to the Cozy Cottage Homestead. Today we're going to be making some sourdough sandwich bread. Now let's get started. This is my sourdough starter, Elsie. She's been around for about 4.5 months now. She is very active and very eager to do her job. So this is a very simple recipe. Use a medium-sized bowl. I already have a large bowl that has been oiled, and that's where I will put her to let her rise. So for this recipe, you're going to need 2 cups of water, 1 cup of starter, 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. I'll use corn oil. You could use olive oil, coconut oil, some kind of oil. 1 teaspoon of salt and about 6.5 cups of flour. Just depends, and I'll show you that when we get to that point. And that's it. That's all there is to it. It's very simple ingredients. Most people should have these staples in their pantry. Nothing fancy. You could use any kind of flour that you want. I'm using what is frugal and what is cheap and the easiest for me to store long term, which is the regular old white flour and my sourdough starter. That's it. So you have your salt, your vegetable oil, your water at lukewarm. If you have well water like I do, you might want to run a little warm in it to make sure it's lukewarm. You don't want it freezing cold. And your flour, and that's it. And I'll move y'all closer so y'all can see how it works. Okay, so we have our medium-sized bowl. Usually whatever your packs of bowls, they come in different sizes, but I'm going to use the medium. And I'm going to go ahead and give my sourdough starter a stir first. And y'all can see it's very thick, very elasticy. I always give it a stir first. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and measure out 1 cup of sourdough starter. Without trying to make a mess. Okay. Set her aside. Right, we're going to add our 2 cups of water, kind of lukewarm. Our 1 cup of sourdough starter. Oops, forgot to grab my spoon. Alright, we're going to go ahead and stir this up really good. Just mix it up. Now we're going to add our 1/3 cup of oil. And we're going to add our 1 teaspoon of salt. You could use more or less depending on what your family likes. This is a more reduced salt, so you might need 2 teaspoons if you like your bread a little saltier. And we're just going to stir it up. Alright, now we're going to need about 6.5 cups of flour. I always start off with 3.5 cups of flour first. Okay, go ahead and get this mixed up. sure to scrape down the sides of your bowl. Right, now we're going to add about 3 cups. And we're going to keep that half a cup in case we need it. It all depends on the texture of your sourdough. If it's a little thinner, you may need a little more flour. If it's a little thicker, you may need a little less flour. So there's no exact science on that. You want to try to get close to that 6.5 cups of flour. You may need it, you may not. I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more flour. This puts me right at 6.5 cups of my flour. Now I'm going to go ahead and get in there with my hand. Mix it a little better. And scrape off the sides. You can only go so far with the spoon. And the sourdough is kind of sticky. I will warn you, it is a little sticky. I'm just trying to get all the flour off the bottom and get it mixed into my sourdough and scraping off the sides. Very little kneading needs to be done. Pretty much just make sure it's all mixed together and stuck together, and that's really all there is to it. It's very easy. I'm going to go ahead and stick my hand in some flour so that it won't stick to me quite as bad, to make sure I have it all mixed and blended together. Just going to flip it over itself just a little bit to make sure it's all together. Dip my hands back in the flour. Keeps it from sticking quite as bad. Kind of make sure it's all smashed together. And then I'm going to transfer it into another bowl that has been oiled. And that looks really good. Now I have another bowl that's been oiled. I'm just going to flip her over in there. She's in there, and then I'm going to flip her back upside down. I'm just using my fingers, and I'm going to tuck under the edges a little bit and smooth out the top. And then lift my fingers underneath the edge of it to make it kind of round, just to make sure that it's all mashed together. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be pretty. I just do that to make sure that the flour underneath is all mixed together. And I flatten it out just a little bit and leave her in this bowl. Get this in the right angle here. Now I'm going to get my cheesecloth and cover her up and let her set on top of my freezer where it is warm. She will stay there and sleep there overnight, and in the morning I will be ready to punch her back down and put her into her baking pans, and I'll show you that step in the morning. Alright, this is the next morning. On this dough that was rising, I let it rise a little bit too long, which worked out great to share a troubleshoot with y'all. Some people may let their dough rise too long. I was kind of off schedule trying to make a video. I normally make the bread the night before I go to bed, but I did it earlier in the day, so late that last night it was ready for me to do the next step and for it to be baked. However, I just let it keep going, and that worked out fine because it lets me show y'all a troubleshoot. Again, my channel is not about being perfect. It's about showing you the good, the bad, and the ugly so that you will have a better idea of what to expect whenever you're making bread or whatever it is that we're working on. So some people would think that this bread is no good because it has developed a crust on top of it. All that means is that it set out way too long, it rose, and then it sunk down about halfway, but it still has more than doubled in size. So all I'm going to do is punch it down and work with it just like I would if it had risen all the way to the top of the bowl. That's all it simply means. Don't throw it out. It's still good. There's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to flour my surface, and then we're going to work on it. And I'll do put another section in here and show where it rose to the top. And so my guess is not to let it rise over about 12 hours, because then it might rise and then drop back down. You want a very well floured surface. Sourdough, again, is really sticky. Go ahead and scrape all of that out best as you can. Smells absolutely wonderful. And the sourdough dough is a little bit softer than your traditional yeast bread without the natural yeast using the sourdough. So you'll see that whenever you start working with it. And I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle a little bit of flour on top, just because my hand is sticky here. It'll make it a little bit easier to work with. And all I'm going to do is pull it up to myself. You can see it's really soft. So if it's really soft, that means you're just going to need a little more flour to work with it. And it's not going to hurt anything. And that's where it gets tricky, because sometimes you need more flour and sometimes you need less flour. And we're only going to need this for a few seconds just to mix in that little soft crust that developed on top. Back over there. Keep working it towards me and away from the camera. Sorry, y'all. So it's really good now. It's very elasticy. You can see it's not quite near as sticky as it was. Alright, I'm going to get a little bit more flour. I'm going to be rolling it back over where it was really sticky. Okay, so now it's all come together, it's all blended in. I'm just going to pull the side over and push it down, pull the side over, push it down, pull the side over and push it down. Same thing. Just going to do that a couple of times. And when it starts sticking, you just got to add some more flour. Alright, it has really poofed up with just a little bit of the flipping it over itself. So that tells me that it's ready. You can see how it just bulked up a whole lot more. Now all I'm going to do is cut it in half. To flour my little cutter here. Alright, put some more flour down. I have two really oiled loaf pans, very well used as well. I'm going to just set this one aside, and I'm going to work on one at a time. Same thing, going to flatten it out just a little bit, bring it back to itself and flatten it. Fold the top and flatten it, fold the bottom and flatten it. And that's all you're going to do. Make like a rectangle. And if it sticks, you just add a little more flour. Fold it over, flatten it out. I'm going to do it maybe twice or 3 times, whatever. Okay, now it's back in a rectangle shape. I'm going to just start rolling this towards me as tightly as I can. The seam is going to go underneath the bottom. And then I'm going to tuck the corners under where it may be just a little bit left out from seeing where you rolled it. I should have turned it. I'll show you on the next one. I just turned it under and smoothed it out a little bit. And you just want it to look like a little log. And now it's ready to be put into your pan. Just set it in there gently. And I flatten it just a little bit. You could sear it with a knife and make some little fancy designs on it. I generally don't. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Flatten it out. Bring the ends over. Flatten it out again. Make sure you don't need no more flour. The dough is very soft. Flip it over. Flip it back over. Flip this over. Flip that over. Flatten it back out. You want some air to get in your dough. Sourdough bread is usually really coarse and airy and has like holes all in it, and it's a coarser bread. But this sandwich sourdough bread is going to surprise you at how soft it is, because the dough is extremely soft, and you're going to have a really soft, really good sandwich bread. So this is going to be our last time. Fold that side over, fold that side over. And see, my seam is up on top this time, which it worked out the way I wanted it to. So then you would just fold it. Actually, you're rolling it towards you. And then when you get to the bottom, that seam is going to be underneath. Let me turn it so y'all can see the ends. The ends kind of poke out a little bit. I take my fingertips and roll it under. And just kind of tuck it under and squeeze it kind of while I'm doing it. And it makes a very pretty edge. Same thing on this side. I'm just rolling it under. And then I just shape it back up. Kind of pooch it back together. Shape it into a little log. Make sure it looks pretty. I have my very well oiled pan, very well used, definitely getting old, and I just simply flatten it out just a little bit. Don't smash it hard or nothing like that, just kind of make sure that it gets all to the edges. So now we have both of these in our pans, and I will cover them back up with the cheesecloth. They will be put right back on top of my freezer, and I will let them rise for about 4 hours. This time I can't forget about them. I have to let them rise for 4 hours, and then they will be ready to be baked. And I'll bring you back and show you that step after they have risen for 4 hours. Alright, so our sourdough sandwich bread has been rising for about 5 hours. I've already took a peek at it. It is just above the top of the pan. Sometimes it rises a little higher, but this is a very good rise. Very pleased with it. And all I did here is I have an egg white and just a little bit of milk. Whisked it together with the fork. And I'm just simply going to paint it on top of the bread. Very, very gently. You don't want it to fall down. The weather most definitely, from my experience, can cause your bread to fall. So the sourdough bread is a little bit more sensitive than the regular yeast bread. So you have to be gentle with it. And I'm just simply painting the egg white with a little bit of milk on top. Doesn't have to be a whole lot. And if I wasn't going to put a topping on top of the bread, I would not even put no egg white on top. I have this everything bagel seasoning. I got it from the Dollar Tree for $1. So I'm going to sprinkle some of that on top of one of them. My oven is preheating to 365. Temperatures may vary depending on your oven. So I would say around 350 to 375 would be the norm. I'm going to bake it at 350 for about 365 for about 45 minutes, and then I'll leave it in the oven for the last 15 minutes, and it usually does great. Okay, and this one is tomato basil seasoning, also from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to sprinkle it on the top of the other one. Now, if you want to score the top of your sourdough bread, you definitely can do that before you put all your spices on it. You would want to do that right before you stick it in the oven. Sometimes I do that if I make a round loaf, but usually if I make a sandwich bread loaf, I usually do not score the top. So now all I have to do is put these in the hot oven at 365 for about 45 minutes. Then I will shut the oven off, leave it for another 15 minutes, and I will pull it out, and I'll bring you all right back and show you what the lovely sourdough sandwich bread looks like. Just a few more minutes. The oven's already been turned off. That's what our bread's looking like. I'll let it sit and rest for about 15 minutes in the oven, and then I'll take it off and let it cool for about an hour before I can slice it. Sure does smell delicious in here. Alright, so I could not wait an hour for the bread to cool off completely. There's just something about the aroma of hot, fresh baked bread. I went ahead and cut one slice off. I'm going to bring it closer to you. This one was the tomato basil seasoning. This is what it looks like. Turned out beautiful. It had a really nice rise on it. This is just like white sandwich bread. I'll put just a little bit of the seasoning on top just to give it a little more flavor, which it is very flavorful by itself. It's very soft. I don't know if you can see that. Of course, the outside's a little crunchy because it's gets a little crisp around the edges, being sourdough bread. And this one was the tomato basil seasoning from the Dollar Tree. And then this one here was the everything bagel seasoning, also from the Dollar Tree. All I did was put some egg white in a little bowl and put a little bit of milk in it, whisked it up with the fork, painted it on there, That way my seasonings would stick on top better, and it turned out absolutely beautiful. This bread right here was one that I baked last week. It did not rise as good. That's what happens whenever the dough doesn't rise as good. Or in my case, I let it over rise so it didn't come high up in the bowl. I think I'll have a picture where it rose higher in the bowl. I'm going to try to put that in there somewhere. I'm going to be doing another video with this bread that got a little more dense, didn't rise. It still made good bread. It's still good to eat. Nothing wrong with it. But since I have some more bread and I keep baking bread every week, I'm going to make another video on what we can do with bread if it just wasn't quite turned out quite how we expected it to turn out. So that'll probably be towards the end of the week. If you have any more questions about the sourdough sandwich bread, I'm still not an expert at it, but if you have any questions, I'll be glad to help you as much as I can. My email is cozycottagehomestead@gmail.com. So I think that's about it. I'll be looking forward to a few more sourdough bread recipes. I know I've gotten a little behind. I had set a goal on myself to get some of these done last month. My health just did not allow for that, so I'm going to keep working and getting some more sourdough videos out whenever I feel that I can do that. So that's about it. I don't have to taste it today. I know it's delicious. After the video, I'm going to slide some butter on it and go sit on my porch and enjoy this bread. So thanks for joining me today. Thank you to all of my subscribers for supporting my channel and hanging in there with me. And thank you to all the new subscribers. I haven't gotten a chance to talk with all of you just yet. I don't have your email address, so if you want to email me and let's get together and talk and get to know each other a little more, that's wonderful. I have several that I talk to every week through text or messaging or through email. So go ahead, jump right in, join the Homestead family. We'll be happy to have you here. So I think that's all for today. So farewell, Homestead family, friends, and neighbors from the Cozy Cottage Homestead.